Boston's story is a tapestry of community and history, shaped by a map 86 years ago on February 1st, 1938. These lines weren't just boundaries, they were barriers. Today, we confront this truth head-on, that our beloved city of Boston is segregated by design. Boston Redline 86 ignites a month-long journey of dialogue, discovery, and change as we revisit our past while redrawing our future. Starting now, welcome to Boston Redline 86, Black History Month event series. Join the Afrimerican Academy's #BRL86 Black History Month event series, with 10 events spanning 4 historic neighborhoods, telling stories of resilience, unity, and hope. From the soulful echoes of jazz at Wally's in the South End, to the revolutionary spirit of African Meeting House in the West End, from the majestic Jewish temples of Mattapan and Dorchester, to our first struggles with diversity and inclusion at Hyde Park High School. Dive into the stories of redlining and urban renewal and join the movement crafting a fresh narrative for Boston. Engage in the events. Experience the walk-in tour, support the cause by signing our petition, and explore the #BRL86 bookstore. There's a role for everyone in this new chapter. From insightful talks to walking tours, there's a place for everyone. Together, we celebrate and stride forward. Starting February 1st, be part of Boston's new chapter with Redline 86. Register, join the conversation, and help build a culture to thrive in Boston. Visit www.linktree.com/Afrimerican1 and follow us at Afrimerican1. Let's unfold history together.
Hello. We're finally here. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Boston Redline 86. We're here today to celebrate and mark the 86th anniversary of the Boston Redline map, which was issued February 1st, 1938. We are, before we get started, we will definitely want to thank our sponsors, the City of Boston, Office of Economic Opportunity and Inclusion, as well as Hyde Park Main Streets. We thank you for your support and making the Boston Redline 86 Black History Month event series a success already. So first of all, I would like to thank all our attendees for being here. For those of you who are here right now, we would like you to know that, hey, it's Black History Month. Happy Black History Month, and we want you to participate. This is a very interactive forum, so you put anything inside the YouTube, and we will be able to show it. So my name is Marlon Solomon, and I will be your host today. I am the founder and senior project engineer at the Afrimerican Culture Initiative. And today we have our very, very special guest, a hero of mine, Adam Susaneck of Segregation by Design. How you doing, Adam?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
No problem. People may not know, Adam is actually tuning in very late night, from all the way from Holland. So we really appreciate. What time is it there?
It's 1 a.m.
1 a.m. Right. Okay. Well, we appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So one of the reasons why we're so excited to have Adam here today, and the reason why, work has been heroic to our work, because we are in the communities of color here in Boston, and we are working hard to try and communicate, and this is even for future things that are going on here as far as development. But the BPDA, the Boston Planning Development Agency here in Boston, which is kind of the baby of the BRA, they are putting a new zoning plan reform into our city centers, and there's been a lot of issues with communication of what they're trying to do. I've been very critical of that because there was a meeting I hosted on Monday, and that meeting in actuality was quite problematic because they don't have visuals, they do not have models, and they're communicating these quite complex ideas of zoning and what goes into zoning and foot plates, and the size of the foot plates means how high you can go. And yeah, to engineer, architect, yes, even sometimes when they're having conversations, they speak in acronyms like, come on, guys, get out your silo a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. And these are, and what you do, basically, I know exactly why you started it, but I'm not going to go there yet. But what you do visualizes, and pictures are worth 1,000 words. So it's very exciting, to have you here to help us, start picturing what equitable design looks like here in Boston. So before we get started, let me introduce Adam very properly. So Adam Paul Susaneck is an architect researching how transportation and housing policy have been used as an instrument of physical division within urban areas. His ongoing project, Segregation by Design, aims to catalog the destruction caused by mid-century urban renewal and highway projects. Adam has written for the New York Times, The Guardian, the Architect's newspaper, and his work has been featured in Streets Blog, Fast Company, Architect Magazine, and more. He is pursuing his PhD in urban planning at the Delft Institute of Technology in the Netherlands and earned his Master's of Architecture from Columbia University, using data and remastered historic photography to document the destruction of communities of color due to redlining, urban renewal, and highway construction. So welcome, Adam. So we're going to start with just a little intro question, about just so we can get to know you, so the audience can get to know you. So the first question is, okay, could you please share a bit about your professional background and what led to you undertaking this critical work documenting the impact of redlining, urban renewal, and freeway construction on communities of color? What inspired you to become involved in this challenging yet essential area of research?
Great question. Well, sorry, I just dropped something. Thank you again for having me. And sorry, I was getting a little bit of feedback. First question, getting the technical difficulties out of the way.
Yes, no problem. We got you.
Yeah. No, I think, okay, now it's good. So I am trained as an architect. I studied architecture at Columbia in New York. Currently pursuing my PhD in urban planning at TU Delft in the Netherlands. And I work as an architect at the engineering firm AECOM, working on a lot of projects, frankly, related to segregation by design, related to the trying to remedy it and not trying,
right.
Especially in New York State. And for me, the project is a confluence of interests. I am lucky enough and privileged enough to be, frankly, the beneficiary of a lot of the policies that I discuss. I'm from the suburbs of South Florida, and I have been privileged enough to travel quite a lot. And through that process, I developed a love of cities, a love of walkable urbanism, of dense downtown areas where life and culture happens. And I was wondering why American cities were so different, and when I studied architecture, it gave me the ability to critically describe what was different, which was really the first step to investigating why. It's prior to studying architecture, I didn't necessarily have the language to describe what exactly, how exactly American cities were different in terms of density, in terms of the built environment. And studying that really gave me the sort of language, the kit of parts to be able to critically examine American cities. And when you do that, Oh, I think I'm lagging a little bit, but when you do that, a lot of it comes back to redlining and race. Am I lagging quite
Right.
a lot?
Not really that much. I think maybe you're getting the feedback on your end, so it seems as if you're off, but we're hearing you just fine.
Okay, then I'm just not gonna see myself. I'm just gonna make it so I can't see myself. uh, how's that? That's fine. It doesn't matter. But yeah, does that answer your question?
Oh yeah, but what got you started? What made you take on this work? Because that's the
Oh, absolutely. You know, it's again a couple different reasons. Like I felt like I couldn't keep telling people to read The Power Broker, or which everyone should read. It's an incredible book. But a lot of what I discuss, you know, it's out there. Like people have been working on this for decades, and people have lived this, right? Like
right.
they've written about it. In Boston, everyone should read Carolyn Crockett's "People Before Highways."
Yep. It's on the
One of the
bookstore.
one of the best. Boston has some incredible resources out there, and
Right.
because some cities this story hasn't really been told,
Right.
or at least told in a systematic way. But you know, I wanted to use these skills that I had gained in such a way that I felt was socially beneficial, rather than continuing to contribute to the problem. Um,
Right.
so again, I wanted to use this language that I had developed through studying architecture,
Right.
um, to be able to communicate what I saw, what was obvious to me, but what wasn't necessarily obvious to folks who haven't studied the built environment.
Right.
Um, and it's not a bad way if you're trying to like write a book. It's not a bad way to do it, to break it down into a bunch of little chunks that you can get a bunch of feedback on and likes, you know,
Right. Right. Right.
sort of gamify it.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. Again, uh, I read the Color of Law, which
Right.
people
Right.
should
Me too.
also all read, and just wanted there to be more pictures, and
Isn't it just that simple sometimes? Just like,
sometimes it is,
yes.
and I wanted to meet people where they were, which is social media, because that's
Well,
where I
it's
am too.
brilliant. It's brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I completely, like I said, like, so I'm here in the community, I'm trying to talk about things, trying to explain certain things. And your picture of the Dudley Street Baptist Church, that was a big, like, I met loads of people, 70 years and above. They don't even remember it. It's literally like slipping out of the, the memory of certain people, the people that lived it, or at least their mothers or their parents lived it. And having the, rest of, there's actually a funny story. One of my cousins, he works in like Bernstein's, one of these like big firms. And he always say, Marlon, your work, I love it because, at that time I was doing construction project management. And he would say, oh man, your work is there. You can see, touch, and taste it. Right. And his work is in a computer file somewhere. So he didn't think it was so cool. But, the thing about it is that, what we're doing is out there. People understand it. But as architects and engineers, we're trained to see things when maybe there is no, and how things work together. So being able to visualize it it really drives it home. So that's why I want to really thank you for the work that you do. I got started. Basically, I was doing my cultural diversity work with the Afrimerican Culture Initiative. That's my nonprofit, and doing my youth program, which is which I teach some of this restorative project management. And restorative project management is what is kind of like the system that I'm developing around building community, repairing harm, and promoting inclusivity. So I use that restorative project management, my understanding of cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I have, like I said, some platforms to do it, including the Afrimerican TV that people are streaming on, because I feel like I need to develop something to help amplify some of this messaging so that some of the development that the community is going through. So, you know, it's Black History Month. So before we get started, so please remember, everybody, please, if you're watching, we have some people online, great. Please, if you want to make send a message, ask a question, put it in your chat, and it will show up here, and we'll post it up for Adam and I to answer any of your questions. But I wanted to give a little context because it is Black History Month. And I know that there's some people go, so what does all this infrastructure? I know that redlining and everything is they look at it more of a housing practice and something to do with, more with how communities, like rentals and realtor and kind of like a housing discrimination. And they don't really see it from the infrastructural point of view. So I wanted to kind of give a little context, and we have a little short video that we're going to watch, and then Adam will give us his presentation on a lot of the work that he's been doing. So like I said, I specialize in cultural diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the structure of culture and how that interfaces with infrastructure. So what does that look like? A lot of long words, right? But it's really cultural hubs. So like Chinatown, the North End here in Boston, which is like Little Italy, right? And basically these communities, these locations, the number one driver of cultural development is land use, and how the land is developed. So if you live near a river, right, you're more likely to swim, more likely to know how to fish, operate boats. Your diet has a lot of dishes, has a lot of fish in it. So these are skills that you learn to, take care of the land around you. And as you take care of the land around you, you now start learning skills that you pass on to your next generation. These are the artifacts, and those skills produce products and services in your location, which end up providing what we call culturally generated revenue. So when you look at a cultural hub, there's always a high level of culturally generated revenue. In Chinatown, it's based on food. In North End, it's also based on food, right? So so using this understanding, I understand, well, if I want to develop communities, and when I started looking at redlining, urban renewal, the cities around segregation that were destroyed, well, the parts of the cities that the African American parts of the city that were destroyed during segregation, I realized that these were cultural hubs based on the ability to play instruments. So a lot of jazz plays bring people into the community to spend their money. And when you look at all the cultural hubs all around, when you look at all the cultural hubs all around the cities and everything in Boston, we started looking and saying, wow, like, I mean, not just Boston, well, all over America. You started realizing that it was part of a network of different communities that used to travel all over the place, right? At different places. And there was actually documentation of these locations. And I stumbled upon a very nice video of a young man. Well, maybe he's a little older now, but a young man called Trayvon Logan. And he did a lot of research, kind of like us, and he connected the Green Book addresses with redline maps. And you'll see his things are pretty astonishing. Go ahead and play that. Yeah, there you go.
Segregation is dangerous. It's so dangerous that even getting from A to B can be fraught with the threat of physical harm or even the cruelest of humiliation. How do you know where to go? Well, beginning in 1936, African Americans developed a historical Yelp of sorts called Green Books. And these are listing places that you can patronize as you travel throughout the country. A place, for example, where you could get a haircut, a gas station that would let you use the restroom, a restaurant where you could be seated and served, places that respected your humanity. And by this point, I was all into maps. So I mapped all the Green Book locations, more than 30,000 of them in the nation, safe havens for people like me. It's ironic then that while green was being used to tell African Americans which places were safe for them, red was being used by the government and big business to tell us which places were not. In fact, at the same time that the green books were being developed, the government was marking neighborhoods in green, blue, yellow, and red for the purposes of residential security. Green was best. And in Central Ohio today, those would be places like Upper Arlington and Bexley. Blue is not as good as green, but it's still desirable. That's the official designation. Places like Worthington or Grandview. Next came the yellow places. You guessed it, Caution. Officially, those are neighborhoods that are in decline. The Short North or German Village. And last, we have the red places. These are places that were officially designated as hazardous. And that designation had teeth. It increased your insurance rates on your home and even prevented you from securing a home loan in those areas. So I had all of these maps. I had maps of segregation. I had maps of the places that were safe as people traveled about. And I had these maps of residential security. And I put all these maps together. And then I looked at the map of Columbus. And there it was, my home. Right in that giant red box, surrounded by all of those businesses, those red dots. I was living in marked territory. I may have been living in a place that was now revitalizing, but that's because the death certificate was issued before my parents were even born. But even more, those red dots told me these were not places destined for despondence. These were safe havens for people like me. Even more troubling, this isn't unique to Columbus. I can show you this map for every city in the United States, big or small. It's the same in Indianapolis. It's the same in Cleveland. It's the same in Detroit. It's the same in Philadelphia. Everywhere you look.
Yeah, I thought that was just brilliant, connecting the app, the green book, which was actually, oh yeah, and you can find it on our bookstore. So you get your own copy of the green book, and it's a brilliant book. When I was in Texas over the Christmas, there's a place called Deep Ellum, and then you showed it on your on Segregation by Design. Please check out Segregation by Design on Instagram. It is literally like the best site ever. And basically the entertainment district in that area, right? It's now a highway.
Yep.
And
Exactly.
this is very important to my cultural diversity work, because this is how the African American community used to feed itself, was during segregation. You can't go anywhere. You can't get jobs. So these cultural hubs, kind of like one of the inadvertent, and some African Americans actually feel like this, like once integration happened, it was worse off. But what often happens is that they overlook the infrastructural changes that happen at the time. So there are things like like voting. People look at the civil rights movement and go, oh man, civil rights, that was so great. They don't realize that it was hollowed out by the urban renewal, because we never got to vote in mass, in the communities that fought for civil rights were not there when it was time to vote, right?
Exactly.
Right. So there's so many things that are overlooked in Black history because we were discriminated from engineering and architecture. So to have that viewpoint from point of view, and I've seen it all over the place. There's even this great documentary now called Uncle Tom, where they talk about how the communities were before and now look at them now. But people don't realize that these infrastructure meant that people went from living in villages intact communities to living in projects and being dispersed at a
Exactly.
very big rate. So can you okay, let me open up this screen, right? And this is this is from the Mapping Inequality site. And this shows every red dot is basically, well, it's mostly class, but it's primarily African American communities that got leveled to the ground. And that is the picture of the network that was the Chitlin Circuit that used to feed African Americans with, because that's our primary, playing instruments is our primary cultural artifact that we pass down from generation to generation. So enough of me. Let us get our now that I've made that connection of why Black History Month and redlining is so connected. Let us hear from Adam. He's going to share his going to have his presentation. Yes, and yes, we'll just sit back and relax. Take it away, Adam.
Excellent. Let me just. All right. Thank you for that presentation. That's really interesting. What he was saying about the destruction of the Green Book locations. And I'll get to my presentation in a second. It's just, one of the purposes of urban renewal was to sort of reclaim city centers for white people. The idea was to attract back the white capital that had fled to the suburbs. And one of the ways they did that was by destroying these non-white neighborhoods and replacing them with, business districts or highways, amenities focused on suburban commuters designed to attract them back. So that's really interesting. I would love to see like what percentage of the Green Book locations themselves are actually destroyed.
Vast majority. I mean, it's literally, I mean, he showed you there were so many maps there, but
Totally.
exactly,
Yeah, no.
it's
Because
basically the same locations.
Yeah. In Miami, I'm thinking about they're mostly destroyed. Yeah, that's so interesting. All right, so getting on with my presentation. So I am going to basically give an overview of the work that I've done. Show a lot of the images, or a lot of the typical sort of images that Marlon was describing. So to start with the goal of segregation by design. So the intent of this project is to investigate the extent to which the U.S. federal government used housing and transportation infrastructure to intentionally segregate U.S. cities along lines of race and class, as well as to analyze the ongoing impacts of this infrastructure, and to determine what, if any, strategies have been successful in creating more equitable outcomes. So I recently had the opportunity, well, it's been about a year now. Last year, I wrote an article for the New York Times, which covers a lot of what I'm going to be discussing today in this presentation. I'm going to speak for about 25 minutes, hopefully not too much longer than that, but I tend to go off on tangents sometimes. But if you want a version that doesn't have tangents, that is edited by professionals, check out this article. The editors at the New York Times are fantastic, obviously. So the project, there we go. So the project draws on a list of 180 cities, roughly 180. It depends how you split it up. But these are cities that received funding from the 1949 Federal Housing Act and the 1956 Federal Highway Act. So these are all the cities I intend to cover. So I have my work cut out for me. And then these are some of the cities that I have covered so far, including Boston. So most of the examples I present today are going to be from these cities. I'm going to take a sip of water really quickly. Sorry, it's 1:30 a.m. here, so I'm a little tired, dehydrated, whatever,
Hey, don't worry about it.
Thanks. All right. So what I'm going to do today in this tonight, whatever, what I'm going to do right now is discuss some of the problems posed by freeways and urban renewal projects, firstly, and then discuss the history of how we got here, and then third, what we can do about it. Just touching upon each of those, there's a lot more to say than 20 minutes, but so starting with the problems posed by freeways, one of the biggest ones is that we haven't actually stopped expanding them. So this is Houston, Texas. So Houston is encircled by interstates, which divide the city pretty cleanly along racial lines. Rather than pursuing ways to lessen the divide, the city is actually spending $10 billion to widen the highways, seen here. This is the right of way. This is another view top down. As part of this project, roughly 1,000 families are going to be displaced, the majority of which are Black and Latino, and 500 of so about 1,000 families are going to be displaced. About 1,000 units of housing are being demolished, and nearly 500 of those are public housing. The Clayton homes here are being demolished, primarily Black and Latino residents. In addition to 20 blocks of East Downtown, part of Chinatown there, the original Chinatown there, mostly gone now. So rather than trying to fix the divide, this is what Houston is doing.
They're doing it now.
Yeah, this is ongoing.
I heard about that, actually.
Yeah. A lot of the evictions have actually already happened. So you can see that the highways divide along racial lines. This is the demographic map with the New York that I made with the NYT. So since the mid-20th century, urban highway construction has worked as a powerful tool to segregate American cities and demolish communities of color. These highways built on the legacy of redlining, creating walls of concrete and smog that separate Black and brown communities from white. While the period of government-led segregation is often discussed as history, projects like this one in Texas show that it's really not. And it's not just Texas. This is Florida. This was built a couple of years ago in Tampa, dividing the historically Black and Cuban Afro-Caribbean neighborhood of Ybor from what's now become a sort of a historic. They basically split Ybor in half and made like what was really Ybor. They partitioned it off with the highway, and then now they're making this into sort of an outdoor museum, basically. So the roads that used to connect the neighborhood together of Ybor now dead end against sound barriers. This is Miami. I'm from South. This is where I'm from originally. A highway expansion project in what's left of Overtown, the heart of the Black community. Yeah, the heart of the Black community in Miami that was largely destroyed. There's not much of it left. It's mostly been just cleared out. And it's not just, red states that are doing this. This is California. This is an expansion project in Los Angeles, in the primarily Hispanic city of Downey. That's taking out a lot of housing there. That's what that looks like from the air. So, moreover, for the communities that remain divided by the highways, this is the Bronx, considerable public health impacts persist. So in the South Bronx, the ring of highways that surround the neighborhood produce incredible amount of noise pollution. And this maps directly onto the highway network. This is the Cross Bronx here, if you can see my mouse.
Right.
And the purple here is actually as loud as a jackhammer. So the people, yeah. So the people within that noise shed are constantly subjected to this deafening roar.
Wow.
Yeah, this deafening roar of highways. It gets a little softer. It's about as loud as a vacuum cleaner right off here. But still incredibly loud. And this ring of highways is also this is the asthma rates in the South Bronx.
You're kidding me.
Exactly. Nearly every single census tract in the South Bronx is in the 99th percentile,
Wow.
for asthma prevalency, and that directly corresponds, or sorry, that's caused. It's not just a correlational relationship. I made this map with a professor at Columbia Public Health, Peter Munig, and he has a paper demonstrating that a lot of this asthma is caused by the particulate matter from the highways. So that's
Yeah, because they can test the people. And yeah, it's not like, yeah.
exactly, and
Wow.
it's not just the exhaust; it's also the brake pad material that sloughs off, and
Mm,
then a big one that we're actually a lot of research is coming out now is the tires too. Um,
right.
so electric cars aren't going to fix that.
That is all hydrochemicals, right? It's all, just different levels of it, whether it's rubber or gas or
Exactly.
fumes, right?
Yeah. That's synthetic rubber. Yeah. Um, so these are some of the ongoing problems. There's the pollution. These are just some of them. There's obviously, I didn't even mention reduced mobility, environmental impacts. But so there's the public health is one of the big ones. But so how did we get here? So now some history. So that was the first part, some of the problems. So the Bronx is really important in this story because the Cross Bronx, which is this highway in yellow up here, the Cross Bronx was really one of these first highways. Was one of the first urban highways to be built. It was one of the first highways to be built through an existing city rather
Right.
than just in open country
Like
like
the
the
central artery here in Boston.
Yeah, exactly. The central artery is also a very important one too.
Right.
That came just a little bit later, because this one was really one of the first planned, and it set the precedent for a lot of later highways.
Got it.
So the Cross Bronx was designed by Robert Moses, and he cut the highway through some of the most racially integrated neighborhoods in the country. So I'll show. Whoops. I'm just going to bring up a video real
That's
quick.
it's so telling how like it's like when there was integration or like people getting along, it seems as if those communities were targeted probably even more aggressively, if you ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I'm sharing my screen incorrectly. I have a video. It's not a big deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, the one that you saw how it develops through.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Well, if you
can
want to go and see it, you can go and see it on his website. I mean, on if it's not there.
how do I sorry, okay, I'm sharing gonna stop sharing for a second.
Okay, no problem.
Then I'll
No,
share the whole.
it's fine. What I'll do right now is I'll talk about the bus while you're doing that. I
Okay.
will.
I think I'm all set up actually.
Oh, you got
There.
it. Good. Very good.
Yeah. All right. So there we go. So this highway, the the Cross Bronx, was very influential in the development of later highways in other cities, not just in terms of the route that it took, but in terms of the institutions that were developed to actualize the project and the tactics used, such as eminent domain, as well as pairing it with large-scale residential urban renewal projects. And rather than following a route that would have displaced far fewer people by cutting through some of those parks and cemeteries, Robert Moses, the designer, overruled local objections and forced the highway through the heart of the Bronx. The highway was completed in 1955. It was in various stages of completion before that, and it started construction just after the war. But the highway was completed in 1955 and was very influential in terms of the passage. Okay, it's still that same video.
No, it makes no, it's actually makes a lot of sense. It really makes a lot of sense because, like, I know that, like you said, the institutions, like people didn't, these were at this time, this was like these were like works of engineering feats. So like even just how to develop it, the systems you need, things like that, they were so important.
Exactly. All right, I have the presentation back up.
No problem. No problem. No problem.
Sorry, I won't jump out again.
No, it's fine.
Yeah. So, right, exactly. It's influential in terms of the institutions, like the TBT, the Triborough Bridge and Tunnel Authority, which is the agency that he creates to build a lot of his projects, really becomes the model for a lot of state DOTs. Basically, so they emulate exactly what Moses created, both in terms of the highways and the institutions. This highway was completed in 55, and Moses then becomes influential in writing the 56 highway bill that provides funding for subsequent highways in other cities. So there's Robert Moses. If folks know the podcast 99% Invisible, they're doing a great like book club thing with the Power Broker, which is the famous biography of Robert Moses by Robert Caro. I recommend folks read that. It's 1,500 pages long, but it is, it's one of the reasons I started this project was because I was tired of people telling people to read that book, because it's hard.
Right.
It's a hard read.
That's it. If a tree falls in the forest, doesn't make a sound. And that's why I say what your work is really transcendent, because it does need to be, it's not your fault or our fault that our attention spans are like Twitter size, So
Yeah.
so like if it's not on there, then the information stays in some book. It doesn't get out where it's useful. So you identified a problem and you solved it. So I think that is something that you need to be very proud of.
Oh, well, thank you. It's a tough book to get through, but I do recommend people try it at some point. It's like, Barack Obama says it's one of his favorite books.
We'll leave it to you. We'll leave it to you to continue converting.
Fair enough.
Right.
Well, so as discussed by Robert Caro in his biography of Robert Moses, the Power Broker, Moses viewed New York as more of a traffic problem than as an actual place. And he seemingly delighted in swinging what he called his meat axe through neighborhoods with populations he despised, in particular Black, Puerto Rican, and immigrant neighborhoods. So while building highways and automobility was viewed as the way of the future, the particular way in which Robert Moses actualized it ensured it was a tool of segregation, both cutting through neighborhoods and isolating others. So the way in which the adoption of automobility played out on the ground was the destruction of communities that had the least ability to resist. For instance, this neighborhood here, East Tremont, was a Jewish and Black neighborhood that was gutted for the Cross Bronx, and remains covered in pollution. Through the highways and associated urban renewal, Moses was able to both open up land in the center for redevelopment. So that's destroying those green book type places and replacing them, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself here. But he opens up the city for investment. He destroys a lot of downtown Brooklyn and replaces it with like government facilities. And in doing so,
That happened here in Boston.
Yeah. Well, and exactly right. And in doing so, also cuts off the largest public housing project in the city from the rest of Brooklyn. Can take another sip of water. Sorry.
No, it's fine. Go ahead. Hey, it's like what, 130, 140 something now?
Yeah, it's 145 here.
Right. You take all the breaks you need.
Thank you. But
awesome.
All right, where am I at? So other cities followed similar tactics, using highways to destroy and partially quarantine particular neighborhoods. You can see here in Oakland, the demographics still match up with the redlining map, and the highways follow a lot of those boundaries between the yellow and blue. The idea was to try to protect the property values in the blue and green areas by putting the highway as a division between, the red and yellow and the blue and green. So in a lot of cases, the highways sort of take the red lines off the map and build them in the real world.
We have a comment from Chris Hardy. The most recent episode of 99PI includes an interview with Robert Caro that is interesting, revealing funny, and really humanizes the 1,500 pages. Definitely worth a listen.
Absolutely. I mean, Robert Caro is a legend. I didn't realize he was on the show himself. That's super cool.
Wow.
I'll have to check that out. Yeah, Robert Caro is like, one of the preeminent urban historians in the world.
Really?
Wrote this. Yeah. So super cool. Thanks, Chris. I'll check that out.
Right.
So again, other cities follow similar tactics. This is Houston, using cities to both destroy neighborhoods with unwanted populations, but then also to quarantine neighborhoods with unwanted populations from one another. And again, that's for the purpose of sort of protecting property values, because there's this notion that really redlining is based on, that racial proximity reduces property values.
I'm going to talk about that later. Yes.
Yeah. And that goes back. That's part of the academic or sort of the intellectual underpinning of redlining, is these ideas created by Homer Hoyt, Richard Ely, the National Association of Real Estate Boards in the 1920s, that basically promulgate this idea that racial proximity reduces property values, that then gets codified into law through redlining. But yeah, we can discuss that later. So history, yeah. So highways dividing. So a lot of cities follow similar tactics. This is Syracuse. Just showing some of the data visualization methods. Miami here. Miami followed a similar pattern, displacing 12,000 people, nearly 100% of them Black, in Overtown.
Right through the heart of the place.
Yeah, exactly. And this was a classic. This is a little complicated to explain, but this was a classic other side of the tracks situation, because you can see the tracks here. So this was the white area, and this was all like official because this is the South, right? So these were their.
Yeah, they're not even pretending over there.
Yeah, no, this during Jim Crow, they were official. Like this was the only place that Black people were allowed to live officially,
Right.
called Overtown. So it was a very much, and the dividing line was the FUC Railroad here. Now, this gets viewed as like an impediment to the growth of downtown. So that's why they destroy it, and the tracks, actually, if you notice, the tracks get taken out, because, common.
There's no need to have the tracks now.
Well, so the tracks get taken out, and then the race wall created by the tracks gets moved right here.
Right.
And then now, this area
This
is
is
now
white.
this area is now considered part of downtown. Exactly, right. So Overtown gets kind of cut and moved like over here and up here. And then now this is like the gentrifying area. This right here is like a little museum area of like what Overtown was. But yeah, so that's I'm getting ahead of myself though. But yeah,
No, I get it. No, I'm loving all this. I get it. Like you wanna dig dive, and then you have things that you want to move on. I get it. Don't worry about it. Just let's.
yeah. And I know
This
it's
is our
already pretty
channel.
late.
This is our channel. We have no time restraints. We're having a great conversation. So
Excellent. Yeah. Well, so again, just talking. I'm still, to get back to the context here, I'm still talking about the history of how these highways went through. So these new highways, this is on the ground in Miami. So these new highways sliced through downtown areas and made possible the development of new car-centric suburbs on the outskirts of the existing cities. And the real estate industry's widespread use of what were called restrictive covenants ensured that these new developments were closed for anybody considered non-white. And so this was standard industry practice across the United States. This is Levittown in obviously on Long Island. All the Levitt towns had restrictive covenants were standard practice across in the real estate industry across the country. So as these highways are punching through downtowns, new suburbs are being built at the end of these highways on undeveloped land that are, or not necessarily the end, but along them on the outskirts that have these restrictive covenants. And, when you combine that with the decay caused by redlining, redlining creates this sort of stick that makes it so people who can leave do. And then these new suburbs create a carrot,
Right.
basically pulling white people out. And Black people cannot follow because of these restrictive covenants. In addition
Right.
to
I
the fact that they only build single-family housing, exclusionary
Yeah.
zoning, and then
I'm
this
going to
isn't
do
all-
a little bit of a deep dive when you get done on Boston in particular, because I know people are going to be like, how does this relate to Boston? But all these things, I think they're very important that we start like documenting like even just telltale signs, like a list of these are the tactics, like there are about 10 of them,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're literally repeated everywhere. But go ahead.
Well, and Boston, it's what's that city that's not part of Boston that's right there? Brookline?
Cambridge. Yeah,
No,
Brookline. Yeah.
yeah, it's
Brookline is
Brookline.
like gerrymandered out of the city of Boston, but it has most of the T stops, like most of the train stops are in Brookline.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, Cambridge, I'm sure there's history there, but Cambridge is a different
It's
I
a
mean, at
different
least
city. It's a different
it shouldn't be anymore. It should have merged like New York did, but
right.
Cambridge at least has its separate identity. But yeah, no, like Brookline, what the hell? That should be part of Boston.
Yep.
But uh
It's on the Boston Red Line map, there and Milton, these are the places that are blue and green. Like
yeah,
all the places that are blue and green are not in the city of Boston.
they're outside. And
Yeah.
and a lot of that has to do with the fact that these places had restrictive covenants.
Mm.
A lot of them are on the outskirts, and it's because redlining is systematically biased against density, because
Mm.
that's where there's housing at different price points. So that's where less affluent people live.
Right.
So downtowns, like the denser part of cities, were always redlined because that's where, especially during the Great Migration, but even before that, like that's where the most diverse part of the city was, because that's where the
Right.
housing was to support it,
And close to jobs and close to the city
and
centers where
critically close to the jobs and exactly close to transportation. But so redlining becomes biased against density because it's uh, biased against non-white people, and the non-white people are in the densest parts of the city because that's where the housing.
I think in Boston in particular, because it was so culturally diverse, it was against, because I always try to be very careful. It wasn't necessarily because there were Italians that got it, Irish got it. It was really class and poverty, but and immigration. And if you're an immigrant, you're poor or Black, those are the people that got it in generality.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
exactly. Well, no, and it's interesting. It would be interesting to see if redlining maps had been made just a few years later, whether or not Irish people would,
True.
because World War II changes a lot, and
Right.
it's the draft that changes a lot because the draft is just indiscriminate. And it's well,
Man,
it
you're right.
discriminates
You're
against
very
black
right.
people. It discriminates against black people, but it
Yeah, but
basically
then the
lumps.
Italians come back and the Jewish, everybody else comes back from the war, and then they're white. And
That's
well,
exactly it.
yeah,
Exactly. It's Italians, Jews, Jewish people, Irish
Irish,
people.
Irish, yeah,
Now Irish had been a little more integrated earlier, especially in New York. I'm sure in Boston too. Oh my gosh. But like in New York by this time, the Irish, with Tammany, were very powerful there in the
got it,
Democratic Party
got
machine,
it,
the old
got
school.
it.
This is ages ago. This is not like relevant to present day.
No, I know. We're going off track. Let's, you know,
No, yeah. Well, no, but it is interesting because the definition of whiteness changes, and
right,
it's a gradual
right.
process. But then World War II really,
Really, you're completely right. So I never thought about that. Just a few years later, because the Boston Redline map is 1938. So if it was maybe 7, 8 years later, it would have been a whole nother. It may not have been so stark. But then they let the legacy of it. Anyway, no, I get it. I get it. I get it. I get it.
yeah. So, yeah. Back to what I was saying. Yeah. So redlining is biased because it's specifically targeting non-white people, and immigrants.
Right.
These people were defined as non-white at the time, but because it's targeting these people, it ends up being always the core of the city that's redlined. There's
Right.
other areas that will get redlined too, but the core is almost always entirely redlined.
Yeah.
And that's what creates that outward pressure. And
Right.
this happens in Boston too. Brookline's not that far out, but it is a little bit farther out.
It's not. It's part of the city, but it's like what happens is that the people that used to work for us in 18 whatever lived so close by. So like actually on the Boston Red Line map, the place with the highest amount of African Americans, 70%, is in between MIT and Harvard, because Harvard is
Oh,
so
interesting.
old. So the people that used to work for MIT and Harvard were in the middle there, 70%. And I'll show you later, but that is was it so it's like then when the city now wants to expand, because now it's modern and it's a little bigger, the first people in the way are the people that used to work for us. So we need to push them out further so we can have a big, because our center is bigger, and that kind
Yeah.
of how, right.
Yeah, exactly. Well, just these restrictive covenants, and the highways punching through to serve the suburbs, that very much happens in Boston. It doesn't completely drain out the middle of the city like it does in like Houston or Dallas, and that's because Boston is 450 years. Like Boston has real cultural institutions downtown that aren't going to go anywhere. Like Boston's in a medieval
No,
city.
I completely agree, and that's why I
I mean that
love
in a good
studying
way.
Boston. I love it because like they can't really tell me anything because you had like 200 years of data before you got to this point. So why did you change?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So just getting back to this because it's getting to be a little late here.
Yeah,
Sorry.
no problem, no problem, no problem. Let's go on,
Yeah.
and then
So
we can.
again, white flight happens as incentivized by these highways, and just a map of restrictive covenants. They're always in suburban areas. Here is the text of one of those covenants.
Mhm.
The premise shall not be sold to anybody but members of the Caucasian race. So here's Boston. So
Yep.
this begins the era of urban renewal because what happens with white flight is. Sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback on my announcement. All right. What happens with white flight is it drains out the center of the city of tax base, and it enters a period of significant decay. In addition, because redlining, makes it so that there's a liquidity crisis. People don't have access to mortgages. So these neighborhoods are physically decaying, the redline neighborhoods. So cities then leverage funding from the 49 Housing Act. Um, they use federal funding basically to clear out this decay. So they see this decay and they use federal money to clear it out as an excuse to remake their civic cores for the convenience of the people who had left. So again,
Yeah.
they're trying to attract them back.
Right. And this is
and
city.
again,
This turned out to be the city hall, the city government center area. This was an Italian area, and you said it got leveled to the ground.
yeah, exactly. Italian and Jewish, because Leonard Nimoy is actually from here, if you know, from Star
Right,
Trek.
right. There were
Um,
55 synagogues. And also, I know that the city only paid $75,000 for all the demolition of urban renewals in the area because the federal government took it over. And they stopped picking up the trash. The place wasn't really that. I mean, it was like this place was hard for them because the people there were like part of a community, like the North End. So it wasn't like easy everybody could take care of stuff, this and that. And yeah, it was tough, but they were immigrant population. So they didn't really so they had to actually like stop picking up the trash
yeah.
and start taking pictures, that kind of stuff. Well, go ahead, sorry.
No, exactly. So yeah, exactly. In this case, the West End was demolished, replaced with expansion of MGH and expansion of Government Center. And what's interesting in Boston is, you have the counterfactual of like, they say that the West End was a slum, but we have like the North End, which was architecturally identical.
That's
There's
exactly it, and it's still standing very well up to now. So
exactly, and it's still beautiful, and it's one of the most famous parts of the city. And then
right,
same with Beacon Hill. Yeah, so urban renewal is aimed at these. So this is also the era of so that the 50s and 60s, this era of white flight, as the periphery, the suburbs are becoming white, or are getting built and becoming white, and the inner city, or the downtown area, is becoming non-white. This is when you see the rise of that phrase as sort of a dog whistle, inner city, to mean like the downtown areas that have become non-white.
right.
So again, what urban renewal is doing is trying to remove these populations so that white money will come back. And urban renewal almost always disproportionately affects a city's non-white community
Of course.
because of that. So this chart is showing. So I made this chart with the New York Times, and so what this is showing is that even if it wasn't an absolute, so even if more white people were displaced,
Mhm.
in terms of absolute numbers, it was almost always a significantly higher population or proportion of the total non-white population. So to explain that, so for instance, in Philly, in 1950, only about 20% of the whole Philadelphia population was non-white, but about 70% of those displaced were non-white.
Okay.
So it's always disproportionately the community of color that gets displaced.
Got it.
I said something wrong earlier there, but the chart explains it. It's on the
That's fine.
yeah.
That's good.
Some people might have picked up exactly what I said wrong there, but it's fine. So yeah, again, it's always disproportionately the community of color that gets affected relative to their total population.
Okay.
So again, like in Atlanta, it's like 35% of the population was non-white, but like 90% of those displaced were non-white.
Got it.
And this is why James Baldwin famously says urban renewal means Negro removal. And he says right after that, and the federal government is an accomplice to this fact. And he's talking about these urban renewal projects. So cities paved over vibrant neighborhoods and replaced them with amenities focused on suburban commuters. In this case, a government complex where a church and subway stop formerly stood.
Right. There's a library there now.
There's a library there now, and this is a little different because this is Roxbury. They're not necessarily trying to like attract money back.
They're just trying to get rid of.
Yeah, they're also trying to police, and this is something that I
noticed that.
haven't talked a lot about yet, or researched yet. So but it's coming up a lot.
I know what you're saying. You know, in that MGH picture on the corner there's a place called Liberty Hotel. Liberty Hotel was the former prison of the area. So the
Yeah,
people
yeah,
in
yeah.
Beacon Hill used to keep the people in West End in that. So they always position. And when going back to Nigeria and how the layout is there is the same way. They put the police in between the poor and the rich. So
Yeah. Well, and in addition, they removed the subway line, make access more difficult.
I'm going to talk about that here.
And the idea here is to, the idea here is to basically kill the street life,
Right?
Because they're trying to police the population. Like they're trying to make them more easily surveillable, and that's more difficult when there's a dense urban fabric. So they're trying to open it up for surveillance reasons, for policing reasons,
Right.
and here to make it easier for.
This is the heart of the city. I'll talk about it a little bit. Let's go on. But this is the heart of the city.
Yeah. So this happens all over the country. Here's Chicago. A couple more examples. I'll go through these kind of fast. But this is another example of one such neighborhood that was totally destroyed, and is now mostly
cultural hub.
Oh, absolutely.
They got all that money in the pockets of those people into those businesses. That's what they destroyed here.
Oh, yeah. Well, and the Maxwell Street's also super interesting. Another bill. Sorry, I was just reading Chris's. Yeah. What's interesting, about Maxwell Street, it's where the Chicago blues as a genre is from, because a lot of the people there, Chicago blues incorporates like a lot of electric guitar, and that's just a direct result of. There's a lot of great pictures. Oh, there's a scene in the Blues Brothers actually that takes place here just before it gets demolished.
That's awesome.
But yeah, that's
it. It's part of the chilling circuit. That's what it is.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, the Maxwell Street, almost certainly.
Yeah.
But gets demolished. Here's an example in Atlanta. And again, this is that example of like trying to get people to come back downtown, not necessarily to live there, but to come and like spend money. So this is downtown Atlanta here.
Wow.
Yeah, to come and spend money, go to a game, and then leave. So this is another example in Philly.
Yeah. And then when you see that there's nothing there now, it's like, come on, like, would it have been so bad just to leave it?
Yeah, well, so this is an example where the project gets canceled halfway through. So that happens sometimes.
Oh yeah. We had it here.
Yeah,
right behind my house was supposed to be a highway.
Okay, so
I think I know the story, so go ahead.
Yeah, this is Heather McGee. So a key feature of urban renewal was the destruction of. So still talking about urban renewal here. But
right.
So a key feature of urban renewal was the destruction of public places in order to remake the city in such a way that is more accessible for suburbanites, more attractive for business investment, et cetera. But so one of the things that gets destroyed across the country is public pools. So this example is from a book called The Sum of Us by Heather McGee. And she talks a little bit about urban renewal, but mostly it's about sort of how these racist policies have really affected everybody and not just, I mean, obviously they redound
primarily, but I get what you're saying.
primarily to the targets of them, but they've affected all
Right.
of us.
Other people's collateral
And
damage. Yeah.
exactly, and one of the examples she uses is this idea of public swimming pools, which used to be very common in American cities across the country, and they were segregated. They were whites only. And in the 1950s, when the Supreme Court orders desegregation of the pools,
But
a
rather
lot
than
of
desegregate, that
right, exactly. Rather than desegregate, a lot of cities drain them and demolish them.
right.
So in Baltimore, they had 1 year of desegregation before they demolished it. And subsequently, then you see the rise of backyard swimming pools. And a lot of these cities,
Wow. Infrastructure, changing culture.
yeah,
Jeez.
well, and a lot of these cities are very upfront about why they're draining their pools. It's to avoid integration. St.
Right.
Louis, Buffalo, Chattanooga, like they're explicit about it. So what's interesting about this is, in the name of upholding segregation and avoiding integration, we destroyed a public good and made it private. Made it only for the people who can afford to build a pool in their backyard.
Right.
So that redounds to obviously the benefit of, or that affects non-white communities, but it affects white communities too. It affects everyone but the rich, basically. And that's to avoid integration. And, to some extent, that's what we did with public transportation.
Yep.
This is a little glib, but Rosa Parks integrated the bus, but so we turned around and we made the bus terrible. And
Oh man.
that's what happened in a lot of cities.
I know it's like everything you're saying is like it's reinforcing exactly. I'm going to tell you I'm going to give a brief thing on Boston, and you'll see everything you're saying. Because when they say it, it sounds like, oh, come on, man. They wouldn't do. I mean, come on, you're just really taking it too far this time, right?
Yeah.
And it's not. No, it's like literally like. But go ahead. Let me finish up your
Well,
thing.
and in addition, the destruction of these systems. I should have had Boston in here. You have the Boston map.
No. I got. Don't worry. I got you
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
Let's go through. Wow,
Um,
this is crazy.
yeah. I mean, New York, there's still a lot, but and the destruction of these cities, or sorry, the destruction of these systems. There's a lot of like technical reasons, and a lot of like. These are private companies, like they had. Well, not even to get into that, but
No, I get what you're saying. Like, there's issues with like maybe fixing the rails, or there's issues with like competing with cars. There's like they always have some issues, but it's not an excuse to do what you're showing there.
yeah. Well, and some cities, some cities do eventually buy their tram network. Boston did, and you have the Green Line left. But most cities did not, and they're mostly just gone.
Part of the red line.
Yeah,
I'll show
yeah.
you. I have a map. It's awesome. So
Well, not to dwell too much on the transit, because I do you want to go to bed before 3?
no problem. You're gonna go to.
Sorry, just because I
No
also have to
problem.
wake up. I have a 2-year-old, so he's going to be waking up in like 4 hours. So it's
Oh
like,
man. Oh no. We need
but
daddy to have energy. No,
but yeah,
just go through examples. You don't have to go too much because I know you're going over a lot of the same things, but in different places.
yeah. Okay,
But
so getting to present day. Okay, so that's some of the history. So just getting to the present day, some of the what can we do about it? This is by no means an exhaustive. These are just some projects that I worked on, and then I'll hand you the floor back. But so this is a project in the Bronx that I worked on at my day job at AECOM, an engineering firm. So our client was New York State, and they're doing some good things there. But this was a highway in the Bronx that divided they destroyed the park. Robert Moses destroyed the park, but basically it divided the neighborhood also from the river and the park. So what we did was we made it so that it's no longer a highway. It's now a boulevard, added these planters that are designed to slow down.
okay. So
Yeah.
these are the solutions. Yes.
Yeah. Added these planters that are designed to slow people down. It's not perfect, obviously. There's still too many
No,
lanes.
but I mean, you can only
Um,
work with what's there, and I think what you're trying to do is like at least minimize and like make the best out of what a terrible situation. But
yeah. And this has been built. This is I got to get newer pictures. This is
no,
still this is a real picture. So added these crosswalks, added these wide pedestrian islands, and then the medians to slow people down.
and now some people in the Brooklyn, or is it Bronx? Sorry, they have place to go to, recreational. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We rebuilt this park, and connected it across the highway. So
Yeah.
we're trying to potentially replicate that success with the Cross Bronx. Maybe building a series of deck parks over it, like the Big Dig. Not necessarily
Okay.
ideal,
That's what I
but
said. These designs are in stone, literally, and because of that, they, like they exert the same pressure that the Moses guy designed it for. So it doesn't matter if you outlaw the segregation or outlaw, like this thing is still working. So do the best you can. I mean, I think it's
exactly. And so other countries have shown, others, there's even further, just straight up getting rid of these highways. This is Seoul. They also built a lot of social housing along it. But these aren't solutions for like necessarily combating segregation. This is solutions for combating some of those issues that have to do with highways being right in the community.
right.
So I'll end the official presentation there, and we can just talk for a second.
All right, I'll just quickly. No, that was awesome, and I want to thank you so much because I'm learning so much, and I think the number one thing I'm learning is how like these patterns, like you said, what was done in the Cross Bronx was now duplicated across the country. So also a lot of the systems and styles and techniques that were used were also duplicated. So real quick, because I know people are, I know it's late, and I just want to go through this so that at least we can have a little bit of, because people will be, okay, how does this relate to Boston? All right, so this is the red line map of Boston, right? The red line areas. This is basically, this is like, this is over here is like Mission Hill, Dudley, right? It goes in there. Now, one of the things the red line map, one of the biggest things that people need to realize, that red line map in itself is really a survey to show where people live, how much they earn, right? And you have to remember that during this time, there was no cars when this thing was built. Well, no car, not there were no cars, but there were still probably horses on the road. It was 1938. Maybe not a lot, but there were a few. And this is before like World War II, like he said. So industrialization is just beginning to get around. There is no zip code at this time. But what they did with this map was now over the next like 25, 30 years until the urban renewal projects, they started designing and putting all these, using this map to know where they're going to put the highway, where they're going to, because they need to know where the people are first. Remember, the first rule of real estate is location, location, location. All right. One other thing that the red line map does is that because of, they know it's kind of, so this is why zoning is so important. And actually people have gone to jail for like it's a couple of inside racketeering when you know where the zoning is and you buy land in advance and you're not supposed to know because that it's like insider trading. They know what they're going to do with a certain land, so they start depressing the property values with these maps. And one of the things that the red line map effectively does is connects my skin color to property values, right?
Exactly.
Because these areas were not necessarily poor. And at this time, remember, like we talked about earlier, white is a very fluid word right now. People, the Italians are white, we're not white, Irish are not white, Jewish were not white in particular. But basically any immigrant that was not, I call them 1776ers, were not
Exactly.
they were not white. Another thing, and this is so much so that, and we'll go to it in the next, let's go to the next slide real quick. Well, this is not exactly the slide I wanted to show just yet, but anyway, no problem. Yeah, but that Back Bay was built because of an influx of Irish immigrants in the potato famine. And then they now built that to keep the white folks inside, the 1776ers inside the city. So it's the same thing repeating itself over and over in different populations. This is Irish to, I guess, like I said, like people descended from Puritans and whatnot, right? So now what we're looking at here is the old, so Boston has two main systems. It has at that time, the elevated rail, which you can see here in the blue, right? And then it had this red system, which is the trolleys. The trolleys over time got actually, you can see here, was once horse drawn, and then it went to electric because they were all electric as well. And then it now went, and then over time, like I said, the rails and things were getting a little old. They have a lot of excuses, but basically they took out the train system and replaced it with buses. In fact, some of the lines are still named after the trolley. So it was a 32,
Yeah.
it was a 32 trolley. All right. And this is the one in Mattapan. So this would be right here on the east side of the wishbone. And I'm going to tell you what the wishbone is here in a little bit. I named it, so I'm pretty proud of it. Okay, these are the main changes. All right. So the elevated rail turns into the T, what we know as the T, the MBTA. And then, but it moves. So like Nubian Square, the train that we saw in the earlier picture of segregation design, moves to Roxbury Crossing. And that's very important. Very important. We'll talk about it a little later. The trolley turned to buses, and then more importantly, no lateral movement. So from after they removed the trolleys, you have to go into the center of the city, transfer, and come back out. You can't go in between. And I'm going to tell you why. This area right here, similar to what we discussed, like the swimming pools, was given up. And it was given up. They rather, for the public good, it's better that nobody goes there. So this is the reason. So I call this the Boston wishbone. I'm going to show you the wishbones here. But if you look to the right, you'll see the original design of the original landmass of Boston. Over 50-something% of Boston is sandfield, okay, or they can call it reclamation of land, whatever. So this is what they call the Boston Neck. The series of parks around it are the Emerald Necklace, right, going around the neck. So I introduced today the Boston Wishbone. And the reason why it's called the wishbone, because it goes through the natural flow of Boston. Because remember, there is no other way after before. It's all water. This is South Bay. This is Back Bay. All right. So there is no other place. This is the only way. This is down Washington Street. In fact, the neck is apparently on East 4th by Foley's. And I think like close to Berkeley and all that area. So anyway, that's the Washington Wishbone. So let me show you what the wishbone is. This is the main artery that takes. This is the main artery that takes people from the center of the city down Washington along this wishbone, because this is the original design. And when it gets to Dudley, that's the heart of the wishbone. That's where the Dudley Street Baptist Church is. It now divides. Now, this is the main artery that's on the elevated train. This is the trolley line. And now you can tell how important it is, because if I go back, you see where all the stops are. You can see where all these are all the routes. So these combination of routes means how important it is to the transportation. This is the natural center. Like you can see here, Dudley was the only way you could get into mainland Boston from the peninsula. When they said during high tide, there was you couldn't pass it. So this is the heart of the real heart of Boston. So when they now move the L to the Roxbury Crossing, they effectively sever this whole part of the Boston Red of the wishbone. Okay, then the racial covenants are everywhere around. Remember, this is the wishbone is going right here. This is the heart of the wishbone going right here. So remember, there's now no way in, no way out, no lateral movement. And then the only place where people of color can buy is in this area. This is the part that people of color can buy. This is what I call the Boston Cup. This is the collector, and this is why this area now is like the BP data says the highest level of children, 0 to 17. When you start cordoning off resources, in this case, the main resource is Franklin Park Zoo. Franklin Park, it was designed, the same guy designed it as Olmsted, who designed Central Park in New York. So it was 1875, the biggest landmark in Boston. It's got a zoo, it's got a golf course, and the only train to it was removed. And this whole area is now barren, right? Because we just looked at it in the other map. And then who lived here? The Jewish people. And then so the Jewish people were here, and then they blockbusted, and 68,000 Jewish people. You can go check out the death of American Jewish community, which is another great book. It's on our bookstore, and this documents what they went through. But they were basically, by the time you put in T stops, put in subway stops, you get higher property values. Take away, you get less property values. So there's a lot of pressure on their businesses. There's no money coming into their communities because obviously there's no train anymore, and not everybody has a car, and right. So their communities are slowly being depressed, and that's one thing that redlining does. It's kind of like in a war, you have an air force goes in, levels the place, and the ground troops come in. The ground troops in this case are the realtors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The blockbuster. Yeah, that's a good. I like that analogy. Sorry, go on.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. So
No. I was just saying I like that analogy. Yeah.
Yeah, so it brings the price down, and then the realtors go in and buy it on the cheap, and then there's a story of they paid some very, like maybe some African American kids to throw acid in a rabbi's face. They
Yep.
All kinds of stories. When black people started moving, remember you can only buy here. So when you start moving in here, they now say, oh, this family, oh yeah, she's maybe nice, but her brother's a rapist and is getting out of jail. Do you want your people? These are documented stories, and we're going to be doing a tour there as we, during the, my Boston Redline 86. But this is the cop. This is what collects it, and I'm telling you, if you start looking at communities, even like that, like Gaza also has a high level of children to parents low. This area has a 27 life year expectancy from Back Bay and other areas. So it's really, this is really very, very serious what happened so now we're going to talk a little bit about some of the canceled projects that never got built. So this is I-95, right? This is I-93. So it goes up like this, and this is I-95. I didn't put that picture in here, right? But there is a picture of, like, you can see the actual cloverleaf, and half the cloverleaf isn't there but you can see the lines where they did the excavation. It still looks like that today, but they didn't complete building it because of a group in Jamaica Plain canceled it. But basically, he goes up through here, these Blue Hills, goes through Hyde Park, goes through Forest Hills. It basically takes the orange line, which is one of the T lines that stops here at Forest Hills. But my house is along here. It literally goes right behind my house. So where the commuter rail is where the thing is. Remember, you can't go anywhere in here. You can't go across here. This is the area this is Franklin Park Zoo. You can't get to go here. I'll go back to that map in a little bit, but this is the Southeast Corridor, and this is where the African Americans lived, around here. And this is where the African American Cultural Hub was that got leveled. This is the Red Line area, right? So this goes right through, this literally goes through Northeastern, goes through BU, goes through the Museum of Fine Arts. And then this is the area in between MIT and Harvard that the African Americans used to live. And it was supposed to go through there and there. On this tip, there's actually a ramp still there that they just, like, it stopped. Like, it's this ramp to nowhere. That's what they call it. So, right, it's still there. So along this way, while it has been preserved, which is actually pretty good, it's like very hard to access this area because the cars, the system, like you said, is designed in 1630. So it's not designed for the cars. That's
Exactly.
not designed for cars. So there's one road to Longwood where you want to go to Fenway. It's like a video game because it's like two lanes and everybody's close together, and you're like, oh my God, I wonder why there's no accidents, but there's no highway there. It's like along this area here. So one of the issues that I'm having, especially because of the squares and streets, the new policy that they're doing, is that they're trying to bring density because they have a housing crisis. So they're trying to bring density to these places now, but they're not working on access first. They're working on just trying to increase the buildings and get more people there, which is going to turn these already congested little tiny. Let me not use no colorful words. My mom might be watching, but it's turning these small streets even more congested, and they're not working. We have a couple of commuter rails here. The commuter rails come once every hour, not and so they don't even, so like the system here is divided into three. There's the buses for the lower class, the middle class is the T and people who have jobs downtown, and then the upper class is the commuter rail. The commuter rail literally goes through these communities, but it doesn't stop.
Yeah, that's like New York too.
Right. So these are some of the things that, I'm not going to go into. Like, I think that we have to work on access. I think we should even think about the trolley lines because our city's already designed for it. But yeah, that's the Boston Redline map. And it's the reason why, a lot of the issues go on today. So I don't want to go too much. I know we're running really late. So all I just wanted to end by saying is that thank you so much, Adam, for coming out and staying up all hours of the night. I know you're too old. We'll be looking at you and giving you problems tomorrow morning, so I don't envy you. But thank you so much, and we really appreciate this. And this is going to be available for people to watch no matter what. So it's already available on YouTube. So I'm going to definitely use it as a learning resource. And I think one of the main things that I like about working with you is that to understand the cultural angle to this thing. And this is where I feel like I have the biggest input. I probably never be able to get all the data. I'm just using you guys' data, but how to relate it, to like the Green Book and the communities of color. And this is how we made our money. So, this is how our culture, if that place had been left, we'd have like the North End, we'd have an African American version. So all these communities all across America are literally silent. We do not drive our own music anymore because the spaces that we learned how to play these music were informal learning spaces, choirs, jazz clubs. We couldn't go to Berkeley, couldn't go to London School of Music, couldn't do all these. We were segregation. There was educational advantages back then because you could get your certification in plumbing and all kinds of trades from high school. So the hubs were already filled with educated people who could do the work and keep up their locations. And we were mostly entrepreneurs because we couldn't get a job. A lot of the poverty that they associate with this place has to do with growth. Our communities were in a closed system and they could not grow. So yes, you couldn't get new jobs, but a lot of the established legacy businesses were not, they were thriving. So this is kind of some of the misnomers that go. But I am convinced, just like the Boston public school system in Boston is 50, the desegregation of Boston public schools is 50 years. Hip hop is 50 years. And I attribute it because these villages, we were moved from villages to projects in the same period of time. And the spaces to pass on our educational content and to practice and to make money from practicing our culture, which is jazz music and all the other music we invented, those spaces all across America, all across at the same time, were destroyed. So, not even like one at a time, all at the same time.
All at the same time, exactly.
So this had a big cultural effect because we only had 100 years basically between end of slavery and the civil rights movement of having these intact locations where we could thrive and regain our own identity as African Americans, not as Africans or Caribbean, but as our own, and practice our culture. So what was taken away is really a big infringement, not just on our human rights, but our cultural rights, our rights,
Yeah.
like how Native Americans have, and how their lands were taken away. These red line locations represent our cultural lands because they're the only locations we've had. Think about even in New York, the Harlem Renaissance, 1930s, 1940s.
Yeah.
Hip hop is made in the 70s. So you mean within 20 years, the first musical art form that African Americans created without any instruments just happens to be almost in the same location?
Yeah.
Is because the environment
Yeah,
built
that's a great
cultural
point.
development. You need
Yeah.
spaces to learn and to practice your culture. So I'll end it on that, and I hope that everybody would join us for Boston Redline 86 Black History Month event series. We have 4 historic locations. We're going to be in the West End at the African Meeting House because African Americans actually started out in Beacon Hill. They were moved from there. And then the redlining of the West End, the Italian and Jewish, and there was actually very multicultural in that area
Yeah.
because it was a product of the harbor. So the West End will be there at the West End Museum. This Saturday, I'm going to be at Nubian Square. We're going to be starting at the Residence Inn, which actually is the location of Martin Luther King's church where he met Coretta Scott King, but it's along the Southeast Corridor,
Cool.
and it's now gone. There's just a mural there.
Well, that's
Right.
less cool. Sorry.
Right. Well. And funny enough, I found out during this time that it was actually a temple of the Mishka Tefillah. So it was a Jewish temple that the African Americans from Beacon Hill moved down there and moved into the Jewish temple, and then that got raised with everything else in the community and Jazz Alley and all the other places. Then we're going to be in a Jewish temple in Dorchester, which is actually now it's an African American church, and we're having a community discussion with a Jewish group called the Boston Workers Circle, and we're going to be having a discussion on the historic relationship of African Americans. And then finally, we're going to be in Hyde Park at the Hyde Park High School because this is where the racial covenants were. So with the desegregation degree by Garrity in 74, then this is the first time that we had diversity in this area. So there were a lot of racial issues around the school. That's why the busing and all the things start happening. So we'll be having a dialogue on that, a symposium, youth engagement, youth workshops, things like that. So we got other events, but you can go to my dear friend Adam has to get some shut-eye. So you can go to Linktree and you can look at that. www.linktree.com/Afrimerican1. Check us out on Instagram, social media. And for that, the first event, 1 down, 9 to go. Thank you so much for this wonderful time. Thank you, Adam. So
Thank you so much. Thanks.
No
I know I was
problem.
all over the place, but it was a great time.
No, it was a great time. And I know you were kind of delirious because of the sleep, but let's go get some rest. And we thank you for so much. And happy Black History Month to all our listeners and people out there watching. So thank you and have a great rest of your